What's going on, guys? It's Cuse Hulk here. I got my friend Joe Salzone sitting here with me.
Yeah.
We're here
How you
to
doing,
talk
Hulk?
about. I'm good. How are you, man?
Fine.
So, if you were a superhero, who would you be? Let's start off with that. Let's start off with a soft topic.
The superhero's assistant.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you don't know anything about superheroes. What's
No.
wrong with you?
I don't know.
There's something wrong with you. You don't know
I
anything
grew
about
up
superheroes.
reading books when I was a kid.
Reading
not
books?
Watching
What books were you
stupid
reading?
Batman
What
movies.
were you reading?
Nothing actually.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
I wish I was reading
So you were watching Barty.
it.
So,
The Flintstones?
yeah, all right. Let's start the show. Let's do this. So we're here to do a mental health podcast.
Yeah.
To talk about things that I feel as men, it's something that we're not supposed to talk about. It's something that's kind of shunned in society, depending on what culturally, where you grew up, how you were raised, and that's what we're here to do. You know, it's going to be a touchy subject. We're going to talk about some personal things that a lot of people don't know about myself. You know, I'm not sure what you're going to talk about, but
Me either.
yeah, right, okay. Yeah, I don't think you ever do.
I've
I don't
done
think you ever know what
I've
you're
done
gonna
no
talk
show
about.
prep for this.
So me neither.
Oh, great.
We're winging it.
Oh, we're off to a
we
great-
met this morning. We're like, we're going to wing this.
That's
so,
right.
It's not intended to be a joke. We are going to laugh about some things. We're going to keep it light. So what I want to do is I want to talk about. I'm going to go with some of my story
Sure.
from this.
Yeah.
My experience with mental health issues, with anxiety, with depression, with things that I think the average person doesn't think people like me suffer from
Right.
or even worry about.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? So with me, my father had dementia, and that was my first experience with mental health. He was a professor, and as he got older, he wouldn't want to get checked out. So his brain got worse and worse because he had so much pride, and because as a male, it was something that you're not supposed to talk about or even get help for. He could have been helped, but he didn't want to get helped because and how he was raised, how he was brought up, it was shunned to even talk about. So,
That would have been what, the 70s?
no, my father was born in 1937.
Oh, yeah. No
Yeah.
one was talking about
No.
anything other than the
no.
war in the 30s.
Right. I think that, they were coming off the Great Depression era.
Right.
They were raised, hard, you know what I mean? So it was also something that stemmed from a family history of, his father, my grandfather, was schizophrenic.
Hmm.
And so he was like ashamed of that fact. And instead of, figuring out what was wrong or any of that stuff, these were the times where if you showed any kind of signs of that, you were lobotomized, and he was, which that's stuff you see in horror movies.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's something to deal with, and I'm sure deal with being the son of someone that went through that. It's like being in your own little horror movie. You know what I mean? And so anytime things would be mentioned as far as, hey, Dad, let's go look at your, let's go see what's going on. You're forgetting some things. What do you mean? What do you mean? There's nothing wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with me. Well, what'd you just ask me, son? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He would just totally forget it. Where I think that if that pride wasn't involved and that hatred and that disgust in what happened with his father, my grandfather, he would have been able to have taken care of his issues. You know what I mean? So, and obviously there's, throughout the family, there's these, there's always secrets in everybody's family. I feel like in my family, that's some kind of secret. And at the end of the day, even though I never met him, I'm proud to have been here. I wouldn't be here without him. You know what I mean? So
Literally.
his story's sad, but to me, it's really not, because I wouldn't be here and I wouldn't be who I am without him. Now, as far as my own experience with mental health, my whole life never went to a doctor, turned 30, and all of a sudden I just spent a week in the hospital. I was at the gym working out, and my heart started skipping beats, and I went home, looked at my girl, was like, yo, I'm sorry. I was like, I'm dying. I was like, I love you. I'm dying. And she's like, get in the car. I go to the car, the whole way, started tearing up a little bit. She's like, what's the matter? I was like, I'm not afraid of dying. I was like, I just don't want to leave you behind. You know what I mean? I'm going to worry about what's going to happen to you. Which, I mean, obviously that's part of it. You don't know what's going to happen. When you die, you don't know what's going to happen to the people. And we're all going to do that. And that was something we were talking about off air. That it's something that you need to be aware of. Like, you want to do good things with your life while you can. Because one day, you're not going to have a chance to do it. And one day, you're not going to be here. You know what I mean? So that's a huge driving force in my life. That's why I go after what I go after. That's why I compete as much as I compete. That's why I go after the movie stuff. For me, you know, even if it's an extra background role, you know, that movie's going to be here forever. And, you know, with the stuff I've been doing on the radio too lately, you know, that's fun. Same thing. I think, you know, those recordings, that stuff, my voice will be on this earth longer. And for me, that's more than, you know, my father was big on achieving things. And there's more than, I've already achieved more than they have because I'm 31 and I'm here. You know what I mean? From the movies I've done, from the internet stuff. If I go tomorrow, knock on wood, I don't want to go, but if I do, I'm here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And what started with that was I started this, after I got checked out, you know, spent a week in the hospital. They're like, all right, you've had these issues for a long time. You know, let's take care of them. We took care of them. And I totally reversed what was going on. And part of it, I mean, a big part of it was the gym for me. And the gym, speaking of, you know, mental health, the gym has always been therapeutic for me. If I was growing up, had some anxiety about something or some, you know, whatever, I didn't get the girl, go pump some iron. Got a bad grade, go pump some iron. Got to fight with my dad, go pump some iron. Got to fight with my brother, go pump some iron. That was my therapy. You know what I mean? And it still is to this day. But where anxiety crept in, and I never experienced it in my life, was after this incident with going to the hospital, turning 30, where all of a sudden out of nowhere, you know, my heart would start beating real fast. You know, in my mind, I'd be thinking about, you know, you're going to die. You're going to die. You're going to die. It would just cycle and cycle and cycle in my head. And, you know, I didn't even know. You know what I mean? I knew I had anxiety as a kid over some stupid stuff, but this was just like something different, where it was just like over and over and over. I'm talking myself into dying. You know what I mean? Yeah. Instead of living. And I would go to the doctor, got clean bills of health several different times. I was like, there's got to be something wrong. You know what I mean? And when you go through some stuff like that, when you're in the hospital, they kind of scare the shit out of you. Because they're like, yo, dude, you know, if we don't take care of this, you cut your legs off. If you don't do this, you'll be in a chair. It's like, I'm an athlete. I'm a physical individual. Without that, I don't know who I am. You know what I mean? Still. So I still have some, as a 31-year-old, I have maturing to do. So, I mean, I've seen you, and one of the reasons why we're doing this, and one of the reasons why you inspired this too, is because you're very open about what you've had going on in your life. And I'm not going to talk on that. You can talk on that if you want to.
Sure.
And seeing you post about it has been, you know, inspirational to me. And one of the points of this is if someone is out there having any of this anxiety, any of these depression issues, one thing that was hard for me to swallow, and sometimes it still is that term, it's okay to not be okay. Now, that was hard for me to even hear. You know, we started this off talking about superheroes, right? I probably have a superhero complex. I mean, I've been a bouncer my whole life. I stand in front of people shooting stuff, and that's just real talk. I've been stabbed and protecting other people. That's been my life, and I'm not crying, but that's made me who I am as a person. You know what I mean? So the fact that I needed help, I think that bothered me more than anything. And that was tough for me to get around. And I think as males, you know, we're all supposed to be macho and shit all the time and all that. It's hard to get that through your head. You know, it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, there is on both sides of my family depression and anxiety. So I was born with it.
Right.
One thing I've learned is there's often something that will trigger an episode. And for me, I was 11 years old, and this was 1995. My grandfather died of cancer, and I knew he was sick, so I understood enough. I understood I would never see him again. And I remember vividly, like it happened yesterday, that we were in a limousine and we were heading to the cemetery to bury him, and it was a cloudy, kind of rainy day, and my dad was in the front passenger seat of the limo. My mom was on my right-hand side. My grandmother was on the left-hand side. None of us were talking, because what can you say? It's one of those occasions where there is no need for conversation. But I distinctly remember my grandmother was sobbing. And even at 11 years old, I was sensitive enough to know that she was in pain. And they had gotten divorced before I was born. I don't think I'd ever seen them together. I'm sure maybe I had, but nothing that comes to mind because this is 25 years ago. So I just grabbed her hand, and I did not let go the rest of the day. She looked at me. She smiled with tears in her eyes, but we didn't say a word. 2 months later, we were heading to a cemetery again because 1995 was a shitty goddamn year, and everyone was where they were 2 months prior except my grandmother because she had died in a car accident. And so there was no one on my left-hand side, and I have never to this day forgotten how lonely I felt that day. And at 11 years old, you're not aware of a lot of things. And I didn't know until years later that is where a lengthy depression began. It's where I withdrew from everything and from everyone. There was a long stretch of time where I was really dead on the inside. You know, I would go to school, I would hang out with friends, but I was a million miles somewhere else. It took me a long time. In fact, it took me until I moved to Auburn in 2012 and finally felt accepted by people I had never known and felt like I was part of something bigger than just me, that it finally dawned on me that, hey, all of those feelings of loneliness and despondency, that's depression. So I went to see a therapist, and I had never been so anxious about anything in my life. I remember having to make an appointment and answering a bunch of I've learned later, common questions, like a pre-interview, and my chest was very tight. So just saying my name was really tough. I remember sitting down in the therapist's couch the very first time, and she asked me what was wrong. And just like an avalanche, it all came out. But I said 3 words out loud that I knew I had to say, but I had never said it out loud. I am depressed. 3 of the toughest 3 words I've ever said out loud or to anyone. But it helped me a great deal. It helped me knowing that there was an actual diagnosis, dysthymia, which is a mild depression. It helped me a lot. Starting to go out and get involved in really living my life. At that point, I was 28, 29 years old, but I hadn't really lived.
Right.
I had done everything that you're, I guess, supposed to do, but wasn't willing to venture out of my comfort zone at all. So I did. I finally did. But to this day, there are still bouts of depression. Anxiety is a daily companion. I've learned that it's always going to be there, but you can live with it. I've gone to therapy twice. I've been on medication. I've put myself out there, and the reason that I first started talking about it is because I felt it was almost my responsibility as someone in the media to put a face to it. Because, yeah, we grew up in that same era where even in the 90s you didn't talk about it.
No.
And even now in 2020, there's still a stigma.
Yeah. Oh, you're talking about, you're depressed. Oh, you're
Yeah.
a fucking pussy. Blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah.
And, you're just having a bad day. Well,
No.
if it were that simple,
Right.
There'd be no need to go to a therapist or be prescribed anything or have to even talk about it or confront it.
Right.
So I remember I was on Facebook actually that I was talking about it, and I stepped away from my laptop, really not thinking anyone would even see it.
Mm-hmm.
There were, within maybe a half hour, there were like 100 likes.
Oh yeah,
And
that
then
post went crazy.
Yeah, and then people.
And I noticed that because a lot of your posts don't get that much
No,
attention,
no,
and
that's
that
not
one
very
blew
nice.
up.
Everything I post is golden, you son of a bitch. I'll challenge you to a duel later.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Well, it won't be me. It'll be someone fighting for me because I'm not going to fight my own battles. But you know, I would to this day I still get messages from people who will kind of unburden themselves on me, which is great.
Yeah.
But I remind people I'm not a therapist.
Right.
There are people who get paid to listen.
Right.
But it's important to have someone in your life, whether it's a friend or a colleague or an associate or just someone you see, you know, the guy at the coffee shop.
Right.
In your case, you know, a guy in a gym.
Yeah.
Or a girl, whatever. I'm not here to judge. But you know, you need someone to talk to. And you know, life is hard enough if there's a feeling of isolation and there's a feeling of nobody really cares. Well, as long as you have one person in your life that you can actually open up to and be real with, it's never as bad as it seems.
No, and you know, back to that point, you don't need a lot of people in your life. You know what I mean? I got a lot of people that know me or claim to know me, and it's like, dude, you have no idea who I am.
No,
you know
I still get people who'll say, you know, well, you talk on the radio every day. How can you be anxious? Well, because I'm a character.
Right.
You know, radio has always made me feel supremely comfortable. From the first time I did it 20 years ago to right now, to 20 or 30 or 40 years from now, it's my comfort zone. It really is my comfort zone. It's where I'm happiest. It's where I feel safest, and it's where I can be myself and not have to worry about anyone judging me. Because really, radio is just you're in a room by yourself talking like a psychopath. Yeah. Where in any other context, you'd be locked up somewhere.
Right.
But I get paid to do
Well, I
it.
think for me with that, I mean, that would be my weightlifting. You know, that for me, it's you know, they use that term judgment-free zone at a gym that is very judgmental, but it's you know, you let all that anger out, you let all that anxiety out, you know, the exercise itself gets the blood pumping, makes you feel better.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Setting goals and achieving them, and then setting a new one and achieving that, keep structure to your life. Discipline would be the term. Yeah, man, I mean, that's all, you know, great, and I think we're getting on to a great, you know, discussion here. And
Well, yeah, the sad thing about mental health stigma is it's always going to be there. For the same reason racism is always going to be an issue. For the same reason prejudice will always be. Because you know, at the root of it is a lack of understanding.
Right.
And there's always going to be people who, for whatever reason, refuse to understand because they've never experienced it or they've never admitted it to themselves. They're not self-aware enough to recognize that there is a problem, that everyone has an issue. But people like us and people who have gone to talk about it and talk to someone about it, we're a lot more aware of someone else who's going through whatever shit they're going through than someone who's, you know, never had a bad day in their life. Which you
well,
know,
how are we to know if they've never had a bad day in their life, though?
because everyone's had a bad day.
Right.
Like there are certain.
Well, you just said there's people that have never had a bad day.
Because
in
those
their
people
life.
that are not aware that they've had a
But
bad
they
day.
don't want to be aware of it.
They have blinders on,
Right.
and they're just going 100 miles an hour one way. They're not looking to their left. They're not looking to their right. They have, you know, they have no real understanding of their own pain because they haven't taken a chance to hit the brakes and say, wait a second, I need to do something about this because it's going to drive me nuts.
Right.
And it does.
Right.
Like, I live with myself. I'm in my head all the time. And even after therapy, after I've done medication, I've started doing yoga, I've started working on my own physical health, I'm driven nuts.
Have you ever listened to motivational speeches?
Not really.
No.
No, I've tried in the past, but it's to me, and this is just my opinion. It's a lot of it is such a crock of shit
Right.
because it's like just generic stuff that I can tell myself. I could look in the mirror and say, "Hey, you're as good as anyone else." Well, of course I am. I'm better than a lot of people.
One of the motivational speeches actually helped me. When I listen to him, quite often. I listen to him, and I got turned on to these about a year ago. It's when I had these issues going on. This speech is called "Fear is Not Real. It exists only within your mind." And this is one of the lines from it. It would hit me because, like I said, I was going through what I was going through. I go to the doctors. Doctors, there's nothing wrong with you. Your heart's strong. This and that, and everything's fine. And I had to talk myself out of those anxiety bouts. You know what I mean? And I'm not really a medication guy.
Yeah.
But if people need it, they do need it.
Yeah.
And they shouldn't be ashamed to need it.
No,
You know what I mean?
I was on Zoloft for a period of time and Wellbutrin for a period of time. I had a
Wellbutrin's, that's something that they give to people who were veterans, the PTSD.
Yeah, it's a very strong medication, and different people have had different experiences because everyone is wired differently, and people's reactions to chemicals. It all varies person to person. For me, it was great. It was a godsend, and it was the first time in God, maybe ever, that I actually felt like everyone
Normal?
feels. Yeah, no, I hate that word because it's
Okay.
entirely subjective. I
felt
fine.
okay. Yeah.
I felt like I really could handle everything, and ever since then, I haven't been on anything in going on 3 years. I still feel that way. I still feel like there's nothing I can't handle. The last maybe 4 weeks have been difficult, but the knowledge that pain is temporary.
That's from a motivational
as
speech,
bad,
too.
It's just common sense, really.
Oh.
I mean, think of the last time you stubbed your toe. Eventually, the pain subsides.
Yeah.
But as bad as things may seem in the moment, in the broader picture, it'll balance out because, especially if you're lucky enough, like I am and like you are, to be surrounded by amazing people who are willing to lift you up when you're feeling down, that's a good feeling. And you go home at night after a long day. You've worked. You've gone to the gym. You've done everything you need to do, and you're just alone with your thoughts. It could be the worst time of the day, or it could be the best time of day because that's your chance to take control of whatever bad thought is in your head.
Yeah. I enjoy that time. I enjoy my me time.
I do. I love driving for that. I've got a 35 or 40-minute drive every day, and I use that time to myself because even though I live alone and I'm by myself a great deal of the time, I'm also doing something. There aren't very many times where I'm just sitting around thinking. That wasn't always the case. That used to be 24/7, but now I've learned to occupy my time and take a lot of that energy and redirect it to other endeavors.
Right.
But you still need to allow yourself time to reflect. And a lot of those reflections suck.
Right.
But then the next day comes, and maybe whatever was bothering you that day, the day before, isn't as strong the next day.
Right.
And then there's another day, and the day after that, and after that, and after that. And one day you realize that whatever was bringing you down doesn't matter. And you've moved on from it. And maybe something will remind you of it, and you'll be like, oh, well, I remember when that really
bothered me
and
37 seconds.
Here I am now.
Right. I'm circling back to my dad here. Now, the only acknowledgement that my dad would have or ever had of his dad was he was a professor. He taught One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest to his students.
Okay. Good
And
book.
I remember him telling me he did that in honor of his dad. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I remember being a little kid and being in OCC in the classroom with him, picking gum off the bottom of the desks, and he'd be playing that video after he taught the book. He'd be playing the movie for the guys, for his students. So, off that subject, I'll talk about, suicide.
Mhm.
In my world, the way I feel about it is that no matter what, like you just mentioned, you have those people that surround you that are there to lift you up.
Yeah.
You have people that, I don't think it matters who you are. You could be a bum on the street. You could be anybody. You have people in the world that love you in some way, care about you.
Oh yeah.
So in a way, I feel like you are causing pain when you do that to other people. You're not really at that moment. You may be having some issues, and you need to go get help before you do something like that.
Right.
In my world, yeah. I mean, suicide is it something that I've thought of? Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's obviously something. There's probably there's gonna be someone listening to this or watching this and be like, what? Why I thought of that?
Right.
Yeah, I have. I mean, I've had friends that have said to me, Wyatt, I think you got this thing called the Cobain complex. The world could love you.
Mm-hmm. But you
could
can't love
win,
yourself.
You can win all these records and
Yeah.
all that stuff and whatever the hell, but you're still going to blow your brains out one day.
Yeah.
And,
Of course, he was murdered.
Yeah, right. Well,
I'm a Kurt Cobain truther. What can I say? I don't want to
Yeah.
believe that someone that
Right.
talented did that to himself.
well, there was a lot of people that talented that did a lot of that to themselves.
But they weren't Kurt Cobain.
No, they weren't.
They didn't start a movement.
Is this a
Wyatt.
conspiracy theory? Or?
No, it's real. It's
Yeah,
fact.
It's fact.
Well, it's Joe fact.
Joe fact.
It might not necessarily be
Right.
real fact.
Right. Right. Well, that to me, and I'm going to say this, for, my girl listening, whoever's listening, I would never go through with that.
Yeah.
That is something that has gone through my mind. Probably more times than I could ever describe or count. When I've been down or, depressed about something. How I talk myself out of that stuff is like I just said, I got people that in this world that love me and that would be, lost without me. And I would not want to take myself from them. You know what I mean?
I've never talked about this publicly.
Okay.
I was living in western Pennsylvania, which geographically may as well be a graveyard.
Okay.
It's an area where time stopped sometime in 1955. I spent 2 years there, and the first year I was so lost in my head. It was the lowest I have ever felt, apart from when I was 11. I was isolated. I didn't know anyone. I was essentially starting over, and yeah, there were some really bad thoughts in my head. But the guilt is what saved me. The guilt of, well, I'm going to leave a lot of people behind. I can't do that to my
That's kind
parents.
of similar to what I'm saying
Yeah.
here. Yeah.
But that's a strong motivation to allow reason to prevail and rational thought to prevail. Suicide is not a rational thought.
No.
And to use that old cliche, it's a permanent solution to a temporary problem. The beginning of the second year I was there, I'd done therapy. I was on medication, but I'd also gone out and kind of forced myself to go out because I'm not generally a social person.
Yeah, me neither.
I've got a lot of, as you know, social anxiety. But I forced myself to go out because I knew that was going to save my life.
Right.
And I made really good friends that I'm still close with, and I thank them as often as I can that, hey, you helped me through a real low point. But the it's not even the shame of suicide or the stigma. It's knowing that there are so many people in my life, in my family, among my really close friends, that would be left wondering, well, how could I have helped him? I mean, how many times have we said that about someone that we know who killed him? What can I have done?
Yeah, a lot.
And that's a lot, but
I wish I could have done this. I wish I could have done that. I'm not sure if it's all genuine.
I think I think a lot of it is. I think a lot of it is genuine. I think
I think the social media posts when someone dies, commits suicide or whatever, that I loved him so much. And I think that 99% of those people never really even talk to that person. Much, anyways.
If you're talking about people who will,
It's kind of like saying, Joe died.
Yeah.
Don't forget about me.
Right. Yeah, I guess that's...
Or
I
Wyatt died. Let's use
Yeah.
that. Don't forget about me.
I guess to an extent that's kind of normal
Yeah.
because, people will eventually stop talking about someone who's died,
Right.
regardless of how they died.
Right.
It's the living that have to carry on.
Right.
And there's one of the great byproducts of social media is now people who might not have had a platform to vomit out whatever is in their mind or whatever is in their heart. Now they have that platform. And even if it's just real superficial, hey, I really miss
So what are you saying?
so-and-so.
You're trying to say it's like a little bit therapeutic?
Yeah,
okay.
absolutely.
For that person.
For that person. And
Right.
and maybe they I don't think they mean any harm by it. I don't know. For the most part, I mean, obviously we're generalizing. I'm sure there are people who are doing it just for the attention.
Right. So I'll give you
Sure.
this thing. So
Yeah.
In my life, a lot of people know that my girl's son was killed in 2006. I don't know. You don't know this, but a lot of people do. When he died, 3,000 people showed up to the wake. Here we are. This is 14. It will be 14 years in May. No one talks to my girl from that time that was friends with him, which and that seems to be, and I know the living need to move on. I get it, but if someone was so important to you, like here you are talking about your grandparents, who've been dead for 20, going on 24
25
years,
this year,
25 years, and they're still there in your heart, and you think about them all the time.
I have my grandfather's name.
Right. So how could you not?
And on the tombstone it says Joseph Salzone, which, by the way, is a creepy visual.
Oh, it has to be.
I wish they had used his middle initial because that's where our names differ.
Right.
But I'm reminded every day when I look in the mirror that I am their legacy. I am what they have left behind, and so are my cousins, so are my parents and aunts and uncles, and we still talk about it.
Right.
Because she died in such a violent way that it's still hard to understand. Right. And it was right around Christmas time, so there were a lot of other factors. We don't talk about my grandfather as much because he was sick. Doesn't mean that his death was any less impactful.
Right.
It's just I think we're able to compartmentalize certain things better than other things. We can understand a person who gets sick and dies because on some level that's what's kind of supposed to happen. You live X amount of years. Let's say you live to 80, right, and then you get sick and you die.
If you're lucky.
If you're lucky.
If you're one of the luckiest people around, you live to 80. Yeah.
That's the way it's supposed to be. You live a good long life. You leave behind tremendously loving people,
right,
and then you go to whatever happens after that.
Right.
You're not supposed to die young. Both of my grandparents were in their mid-50s. So there's the element of, I was robbed of, and I'm the oldest of all my cousins on my dad's side.
Is this a way that you feel?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is the way we all feel.
Well, you being robbed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not.
I don't think everyone feels that way when someone passes. There's some people that legitimately
No,
don't care.
I'm just talking about
They don't know
myself.
how to. Right, you. That's what I mean.
Yeah,
That's why I asked that. Right.
I'm.
We all is what your family feels. I mean.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's good. You come from a kind and caring stock.
Yeah, and I understand
there's really not.
Yeah,
that's not everyone.
No, it's not everyone,
I mean?
and I have a hard time understanding that sometimes.
Me too.
Because I'm sympathetic to people that don't have that kind of closeness. And by the way, I had to repair a lot of relationships with my family because I was so deep in my own head that I had strained a lot of those relationships, not on purpose, but I was living elsewhere. I was away from everyone. I was removed from a lot of situations. I was so focused on work when I was in my 20s that I missed out on a lot of holidays and birthdays and just get-togethers that I'm now in my mid-30s trying to make up for that.
Right.
And even though I still live away from everyone, I try, even if it's just a text or a phone call, or most of my family still lives in Long Island, which is like a 5-hour drive. My parents live in Indiana. That's a 9 or 10-hour drive. I try to make time to see everyone because one day they're not going to be there. I had in October.
There's not any of your family that you're just like good riddance.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
All right.
Absolutely.
So I don't feel as bad because you're telling me this, and I'm like, all right. Well,
no, I
there's
mean,
there's things in mine. I mean, there was
yeah.
things that went down with my dad. You know that people didn't want to admit that there was something wrong.
Yeah.
And I was the one, experiencing it and taking care of him. And no matter what I said, it was like they didn't believe me. And it was just like, okay, because I was the bouncer at the strip club and I didn't go to college like the rest of them.
Right.
And you know what I mean? So there was
God,
just something that, and that's the type of family that's not my whole family, but that's in my family. I mean, since then, I've gotten so many out. With what I've been doing between the movies and the weightlifting and all kinds of stuff, I've an outpouring of love and support from family members I've never even met. You know what I mean?
That's a good thing, though, isn't it?
Thing. No, oh my God, are you kidding me? I mean, right now I get chills just talking about it. Like, I've never met these people.
I can see that.
Yeah.
I
They tell me. I mean, they're majority of them are from Texas, and they're Hispanic.
Yeah.
And if you looked at them and looked at me, I mean, you'd be like, what? They're all your height. Little Hispanic guys. Running around.
I feel personally attacked. I'm a giant if I lived 1,000 years ago.
They're just like, and down here we brag about you, and when that you get that type of, it's like, wow.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I'll tell you a story.
Because you had such issues with family members
Right.
that you thought, respected you, that you go from that to that, and you're just like,
Right.
you brag about me. This other person, thinks that I'm, the biggest piece of shit in the world.
Yeah.
That I was lying that my dad had dementia. It was like, you weren't here to experience it, so
I'll tell you a story.
Come and do it, and
Summer of
that never happened.
Summer of 2016, I was invited to a radio conference on Long Island. So it was
You're on the radio?
marginally.
Oh, marginally. Okay.
I'm going to get in trouble for that. Can we cut that out?
Nope.
Son of a bitch. No, but it was. I went. I hate networking. I hate it so much.
Yeah, dude, I hate it
It
too,
makes
man.
me really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I went because it was really a chance to see see my aunt and uncles, see my cousins, hang out with them because I hadn't seen them in a while. And I remember we were at my my aunt and uncle's house in their kitchen, and we were playing a card game, and we were drinking. And I felt good enough and comfortable enough to say, I hope no one ever took offense to me disappearing for a while and going out and building a career for myself. And they said something that I guess I needed to hear, and that is we were never disappointed. We were never unhappy that you weren't around. We're proud of what you've done. We're proud of what you've been able to accomplish. And I always cite that as the turning point of, okay, you know what? Work is important and it pays the bills, but family is more important. So whatever free time I have, which isn't much, I try to, even if it's just a quick weekend visit.
Are they around here?
No. The closest family I have around here would be about 3 hours away, which doesn't seem that bad, but I don't know. There's a difference, I guess, in my head and just the way my brain is wired. There's a difference between driving down 17 for 3 hours and meeting up with some people versus going on like 1,000 different bridges and spending a weekend.
Right.
To me, it's just it's more taxing to do that. So I feel like it's worth it, but it's not taken away from the people that are actually technically closer.
Right.
And I need to get better at that. I wish I had an even amount of time to see everybody.
Right.
And maybe if I were better at time management, I could. But the reality is, I also have a life to live.
Right.
And they all understand that I've built a life up here that I can't necessarily walk away from. I've got responsibilities. I've got other things I do outside of radio because it's important to have a life for yourself.
Right.
And although it's wonderful to have a supporting family, it's also important to be able to stand on your own 2 feet.
Right.
And,
Absolutely.
And it's
I think for me, if we're weighing the two of those,
Yeah.
the latter is more important. If I'm weighing those in my personal life, the latter is more important. You can have the richest, the most supportive family in the world. If you can't stand on your own 2 feet, what's the point?
And it's hard.
They didn't teach you to stand on your own 2 feet.
And it takes a lot of guts.
Right.
It takes a lot of balls to stand on your own 2 feet. And look, I've asked for help. It's hard to do.
Oh yeah, man.
I hate
agree.
it. I hate it every time. But again, knowing that you have that, for a lack of a better term, you have that safety net
Right.
that is, again, willing to catch you when you fall. That's a good thing. Knowing that you've got such a big network of different kinds of people in your life that will take time out of their day to reach out, even if it's just a quick, hey, are you okay?
Yeah.
Or do you need help with anything? Or, hey, you want to come over and hang out?
We see, I lack in that in my life, and I think that's, and not that I need that at all, but I think because of who I am and what I do for a living, and even some of my best friends, I can count on one hand how anyone's reached out to me like, hey man, like, you okay? Like, how's everything? Like, and been legit about it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I'm blessed to have those few on that one hand that have done that. The other thing about what you're saying about having a life, I mean, one of my issues has been I've been so driven for the gym and for the records and for, whatever I want to achieve, that I don't have that much time to really have a life. In fact, sometimes it's like, this is fun to me. The lifting, the auditioning, the submitting, the, speaking, with you and, on air and stuff like that. That to me, the business I have, I think a lot of us get wrapped up in that. And we need to remind ourselves, life is short, smell the roses. But on the other hand, it's that very phrase that's driving you to achieve that stuff. You know what I mean? Hold on a second. I've been at clubs, and I'm at every weekend. I work a door somewhere still, and I just look around. And one of the things, speaking of like social anxiety, you talked about it earlier. One of the things that makes me good at my job is because of that. I'm really not good at mingling with strangers.
Yeah.
And the fact that I have a disdain and that anxiety when I'm in a group of a massive sea of people, I can pick out trouble because that's what I'm focusing on. I'm not focusing on, anything else. And in my mind, I'm like, how is this fun to people? And it makes you feel alienated. Like you said, you got to learn to go out and stuff like that. It makes you feel alienated. You're like, what the hell is wrong with me? This is what's fun for people, to go out and get hammered and whatever it's going to be. And, New Year's Eve, like, I talked about it with you on the radio, and I said that, it was like one of those zombie prom movies, and all the girls start puking at midnight. It was just like, holy shit, let's go out, get hammered, throw up all over my nice clothes, and this is fun. This is life. Like, I've been so removed from that society and that viewpoint on the world that you feel like there's something wrong with you. You know what I mean?
Being in a crowd of people makes me feel very lonely.
Right.
Being by myself or hanging out with some friends or being with family, I feel great. But walking into a crowded place, no. The few times that I'll accept an invitation to go to a party, because I'm not a party guy. I'm a loner. I always have been.
Right.
That's how I'll die. I'm gonna die alone. That's just how it is. Not a pity party. It's just you.
I think we all do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's
you're in the room alone. Your wife may be with you. She may have walked out of the room when it happened.
Right,
you know what I mean? It's
if you're lucky.
It's you facing you.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
A lot of the times I'll accept an invitation knowing that I'm going to regret it, knowing that I'm not going to have a lot of fun,
Right.
because as soon as I get in, I'm going to find the nearest wall and I'm going to stand there and just observe, and then think in my head, okay, what's my out? How quickly can I leave? Not say goodbye to anyone, because I'm famous for that. Days later, I'll get, well, when did you leave? I don't know, 15 minutes after I arrived.
Yeah,
Oh,
right.
I didn't say bye to anyone. Yeah, why bother?
Yeah.
Why bother?
So same thing. I mean, I'll stand. I mean, and that's why it's made me good at my job, being a bouncer. I find the nearest doorway of any party, and I'm there. And you know, I'm okay with greeting people on the way in, the brief introduction. Hey, how you doing? Good to see you. You know, blah blah blah.
That's too much even for me.
Yeah, but then after that, it's like, what's the point? You know what I mean?
I get very tense about having to introduce myself to someone.
Right.
I don't know why it is. 'Cause, I mean, I literally say my name every day on the radio.
Right.
So it's not like I'm averse to saying that.
I mean, we spoke a little earlier. They're actually not seeing you.
Right.
It's your voice.
Well, I get this a lot where people will they've listened to me for however long, and they'll say, "Boy, you sound the same way off air." Well, there's a reason for that. It's because it makes me feel comfortable. There aren't a lot of people I'll talk to in my
So you're saying you're
my real
carrying
voice.
on your facade
Yes.
on the air in real life.
and to an extent, I mean, they've kind of, my real personality and my radio personality have sort of become one, just because I've done it for so long. But I'm also careful to still maintain some kind of balance between the two, so I can have a real conversation with one of my best friends and talk in my quote real voice, which isn't really that different from my radio voice. It's just a little quieter.
Right.
My real voice is lacks balls, we'll say. I've got a ballsy voice, Wyatt. Not as ballsy as yours.
Yeah, you've said balls like 4 or 5 times in this interview.
It's my understanding this is not being broadcast anywhere. That
Not
we're
yet.
actually just talking into a tin can.
Not yet. We are. We're in a glass case of emotions.
Ah, been there,
Yeah.
still there.
Yeah.
But you know, I'm envious of people that seem to make friends easily. My dad is like that. My dad,
But you just use the word "seem," so they seem to. Are they really making
because
friends
to
easy?
me it seems like it.
Yeah.
To them, it probably is effortless. Like my dad is the greatest extrovert I've ever known. He is everything. His personality-wise is everything I wish. And I mean, I have some of it.
Right.
You know, I have his sense of humor. I have an ability to connect with people. I just am not comfortable doing it.
Right.
It's really as simple as that. I've watched him walk into a room, not know a single person, and within a half hour he has 1,000 friends. You could drop him off in the desert.
Is that real though? Like, I mean, that's
Yeah, because that's who he is.
yeah.
You know, and you know, he.
I mean, what I'm saying is, are those people really his friends? Those 1,000 people?
Well,
Do these people really check on him?
I
Do
don't
these
interview.
people-
I don't do post interviews
Well,
with
maybe
them.
maybe you should
Say,
still
hey,
do that.
you met my dad at the grocery store. What do you really think of him? And they'll be like, who are you? Why do you have a microphone?
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
that's
I mean, I'll say to
perfectly
you, I mean, my dad isn't here anymore, and your dad recently had a little bit of a health problem.
Yeah.
Talk to him, figure him out. You know what I mean? If you can,
natural.
that would be my advice.
I went out there in August. I spent a week with my parents in Indiana, which is not where I grew up. So it was a weird dichotomy of I don't know anyone out here. I don't have any friends here, but I'm happy to spend time with my parents that I've always been closer with my mom than with my dad, and I've gotten to really know my dad as I've gotten older and left a lot of the stupid childhood anger in the past. But you know, my dad and I especially had so many great conversations that week that when he was going through some medical difficulties, we'll say, a couple months after that, the one thing that really made me feel better was knowing that, you know what, if this is it, there's no thought left unspoken. That we were able to have a lot of those talks that maybe we should have had years ago, but whatever. I don't live. I try not to live in the past. It was a saving grace of at least I won't regret that. Damn, I wish I had told my dad X, Y, and Z. I don't have that.
Right.
Next time I see him, which would probably be next year, maybe I will ask him, how are you? Well, you know what? He and I did have that conversation, and he said, Joseph, because he calls me Joseph. Joseph, you have that capability, and he's right.
He is.
I do.
Yeah, 100%.
But I have my mom's anxiety.
Right.
My mom is, bless her heart, even more introverted than I am. She doesn't like being around a lot of people.
Right.
I've learned to accept that that's part of the reality of what I do for a living.
Right.
Why I was born, which was to do radio.
Right.
So she, I see both of them interact in different settings, and it's like, God, I'm watching different sides of me. But I've learned that I have the best qualities of both of them, and the worst.
Right.
Being anxious is not fun, but I've accepted that is part of me, and it's always going to be part of me. And it's why when I go on dates, one of the first things I talk about is, hey, there's the public me, which is fun and easy to talk to, but there's this other part that isn't widely as publicized, which is sad, always.
Right.
And
I think that's one of the reasons for this. I mean, there was some stuff that, like, I started this off with, hey, people think they know me. There's some stuff that you don't know.
Right.
The same thing going on in your life. You know what I mean? Things that you would think that people, the outside world, would think that you wouldn't go through or didn't affect you. You know what I mean? And let's on parents again. We've been talking a lot about parents.
Yeah. Well, they're a huge part of our lives.
They are very influential on your life. I mean, back to my dad one more time. I mean, for me, it was like I failed a lot as a kid, and he was a teacher, and I didn't want to get good grades. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And I kind of rebelled, and I wanted to play sports and do this and do that. And I got bad grades, and it wasn't because I was dumb; it's because I just didn't care. You know what I mean? And one of the things of him being educated, he would tell us, what they're teaching you is bullshit anyways. They're teaching you what the winners want you to know, what happened. And, talking about history, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then as I got older and, started to become successful, articles started becoming, started writing articles about me, all this stuff. It was, I was looking for that at 25, 26 for that, hey, I'm proud of you thing. And by that time, the dementia had been setting in, and I just didn't get it. You know what I mean? So when I do achieve things and when I do stuff, there are times, and it's going to sound weird, but you actually, like, tear up a little bit where it's like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
He knows that I just did what I just did. You know what I mean? So
I was
regardless of what your beliefs are, whatever, you do get that feeling.
Oh, yeah. I mean, deep down, even in the darkness of dementia, there is still, it might be amazingly small, but there is still a part of that humanity that is proud.
Right.
I remember my dad.
Well, I put an article down in front of him, the first article that was written about me, and I mean, he couldn't even read it. You know what I mean? So for me, that was, I couldn't prove to him that I wasn't that piece of shit bouncer that was uneducated. Right. You know what I mean? That time was gone. And then what I had to realize is, what we were talking about earlier, standing on your own 2 feet anyways. You don't need that.
Can I ask you something? Because you've brought up I didn't go to college either. I started doing radio as a junior in high school, and I used to be very insecure about it. Not so much anymore. Are you insecure about not having that college degree?
Not at all. Not at all. I'm not. Nope. Because I'm a pretty successful individual.
Yeah,
I'm a high school dropout, man. But I do not characterize myself as that.
Right.
But the outside world wants to look at it. I dropped out of high school. I am doing things way beyond what I thought I would ever do. And, one thing I did with my dad, the first time, weightlifting was for stupid people. That was for dumb people. And that's one reason why I got real into it.
Is that why they call it a dumbbell?
Yeah, I mean, you're a funny guy.
I try.
You're a funny guy,
It masks my pain.
So I see that, and I think you do use that.
Oh, I have to.
Absolutely.
God, if I didn't
see
have
that
a
in
sense of
you.
humor, I would have gone crazy years
So,
ago.
22 was the first time I broke a world record in a powerlifting federation, and I took the medal, and he was there. I took the medal and put it around his neck, and I do remember him like tearing up a little bit.
Right.
And in a way, I guess that was my moment where it was like, "Hey, dude,"
Because there was
I'm
that, there was
I'm
still
not
that,
quite that.
there was still that grain of reality that had not yet been taken over by the curse of dementia.
Right.
There was still that part of him that recognized you're his son, you've achieved this amazing thing, and he's proud of you.
Right.
Even if he didn't verbalize it, the tears,
Right.
that's the expression of
Right.
pride.
Right. And if he didn't, it was just like a "fuck you, Dad."
Well, there you go.
You know,
I guess there's that too.
Either way. But yeah, I mean that's one thing. I mean with the T-shirt company that I opened, LozanoStrong.com. That part of the proceeds of that goes to Alzheimer's and dementia research. That 10% of everything that comes in just goes.
Can we
In
talk
fact,
about
this year I might just throw it all at it because
can we talk about death for a second?
haven't we been doing that this whole time?
Well,
Let's go ahead.
to an extent.
Yeah.
I've, the downside to learning about your family's medical histories is knowing that there's going to be a time in the not too distant future where you're going to start having problems.
Right.
I've learned there's dementia and Alzheimer's on both sides, so I know that's probably going to be a thing at some point. Hopefully later. There are heart things. There are colon things, which I'm not really looking forward to.
No. Well, as males, we all end up having some kind of prostate issue, no matter what.
There might be, I think it's called degenerative disc disorder.
Yep.
Which I'm apparently is hereditary, which all scares the shit out of me.
Right.
Because I'm going to wake up one day and I'm going to be old.
Yeah, but you
And I'm
can't.
gonna
You
be
can't.
broken.
You can't harp on that though.
No, and that's the key. 10 years ago, I would have. 10 years ago, I would have been obsessed
Right.
with the knowledge that one day I'm not going to be around anymore.
So I mean, speaking of same thing here. I mean, we have heart disease.
Yep.
And I'm the biggest Lozano to ever exist. I got heart disease on both sides. So eventually I'm going to have to do something if I want to prolong my stay on this earth. I'm 350 pounds, and 350-pound men don't live that long.
No. That's a lot of weight to carry around.
It is. But at the same time,
Which is the most
there's-
obvious thing I could have said there.
There's dreams. It is. You blurt the obvious out.
Well, that's
from
what I
time
do.
to time,
It's my job.
No filter. But but part of my dreams and goals involve the weightlifting, and I mean, 99% of the movie gigs or television show gigs I have gotten has been because I was a big dude. The whole America's Bouncer thing, that was started, in the studio with you there.
Yeah.
And it just went with it,
Now we call you the strongest man in the world.
Yeah, which, I think that's also said to stir the pot, you know what I mean? Because, the guy in the studio there, Gomez.
You can say who it is.
So Gomez,
Not a secret.
I didn't want to like bring it up here because I don't want anything we talk about here reflecting poorly on anything else.
Gomez doesn't pay attention to my life at all. Don't worry.
Well, I mean, it seems like no one does.
Ah, hurtful.
Yeah, man. So now I'm totally off track. Thanks, buddy. Thanks. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Can I take over the hosting now?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, because I don't like being a guest. I feel it feels weird.
Right.
The whole
So-
dynamic of this relationship has changed.
It hasn't changed,
Yeah.
really. I wouldn't call it a relationship.
Oh,
Yeah. Well,
wow, you're just.
typically you're the bully, and I just, take all the shit.
I
you
am
dish
not a.
out.
What? How am I a
So,
bully?
You take out your aggression on us.
Have you? When I'm next to you, it's like I'm mini me. I am like I am a third the size of you. How am I a bully?
That's usually the bully. That's
You
usually,
weigh-
That's usually his size.
You weigh
know what I mean? It's
500 pounds.
It's usually, it's usually the little guy that's the bully with the Napoleon complex.
Your
that
head
has to prove
is the
everything to
size
everybody else.
of a small Buick.
Yes, I do have a big dome.
You have a. I don't know about that,
Right.
but you're this big hulking brute of a guy, and I'm this little pipsqueak with a microphone.
Right.
How am I a bully?
So where I was going with that, I'm done talking to you about you being a bully. So where I was going with that was
Well, so much for the therapy.
the whole America's Bouncer thing. If I was your size, it wouldn't work.
No, it wouldn't. It would just
You
be
know what
ironic.
I mean? It would just be ironic, exactly. So the movie roles, the weightlifting, the job. I mean, I've made a living off being that big guy. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So in a way, I mean, back to a full circle in our conversation here, back to like suicide and stuff like that. I am knowingly playing with fire here. You know what I mean? So
How do you introduce yourself to people? Do you introduce yourself as a bouncer? Do you introduce yourself as
I'm Wyatt
an
Lozano.
entrepreneur? Or is it that simple? Because that's what I'm Joe Salzone.
That's all I do. I don't put any labels on myself. I don't introduce myself as America's Bouncer. I don't introduce myself as Syracuse Strongest Man. I don't introduce myself as
Correction.
any of that.
World's strongest man.
I definitely don't introduce myself as World's Strongest Man. These are all terms that people have put on me
Right.
that I never came up with.
So how do you see yourself?
So the funny thing about that is the whole era of people got like mad about that article that was written, and it's like I didn't say it; someone else said it. I mean, what's your problem?
But
You
we
know what I
live in
mean?
we
Like,
live
it's
we live
absolutely
in that
to this day.
outrage.
I've had people like talk shit to me over the internet within the last year about that, and it's been like, dude, really? You've waited 5 years to say something to me about that?
everyone-
What is your issue, man?
everyone-
Holy shit!
Everyone is
You know.
is really fucking brave with a keyboard.
Oh yeah.
The internet has cultivated this whole culture of I'm better than you, and here's why.
Right.
Well, shut the fuck up.
Everyone's an expert on everything.
That's
It's
it.
like,
It
holy
drives me
shit.
nuts. It's why if I weren't in the media, I would not be on social media.
Yeah.
It's
Well, one thing when I'm
most
on
of it's
air with
garbage.
you guys, it's hard for me not to swear. You know, that's one thing
I've
because-
noticed.
Yeah, I know you've had to bleep
yes,
me.
yes,
You've
I
had to
have.
bleep me several times. You know, I mean, if I'm just being real in a conversation, I mean, I'm going to swear from time to time. You know, this is the
It
way
feels
is.
unnatural, by the way, cursing in front of a microphone. There's a part of me.
I think it's because you've been trained so much by
Yeah.
the station that.
Absolutely, there's a
You
part of
know.
me that kind of wants to almost self-edit.
Right.
But this is how people talk.
Right.
You know, this if the ideas have a real conversation, well, it's great to have conversations on the radio, but there are obvious restrictions. This is
Yeah, but
basically
you
anarchy.
can say bitch and shit on TV, but you can't say it on the radio.
Well, I mean, you could say anything.
especially on an adult radio station that plays music that the majority of people who are walking around don't even know the names of the people that are on there. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So
Including me.
unless you're 40, 50 years old,
I am not.
you know, I'm not either. I'm not. I hope to make it there one day.
Yeah, I think you
know
will.
what I mean?
Why-
I think I will. I think it'll be fine.
You just winked
you
at
know,
me. Why did you wink at me?
Because if I don't, I want you to know how much I love you. So,
Okay.
All right.
Uncomfortable. It's
Yeah.
weird. It's made us very very nervous now.
Okay. So let's back to mental health.
Yeah.
It's okay to not be okay.
Yeah, it is.
And that's something that we both had to realize. You had to realize that. I had to realize that. The other thing I like about our rapport is, you know, it's like Mutt and Jeff. You know what I
What?
mean? Yeah, I'm 350. You're 200. You're 5'3".
I'm not
6'3", you know
200
what I mean?
pounds.
Whatever you are. What are you?
185.
Oh, so even worse.
Okay. And
You're just a-
so
you're
you've
just a
given me
little guy.
15 extra
So-
pounds, and you've robbed me
so-
of 1 inch in height.
It's okay to not be okay. If you have issues, go get checked out.
Yep. Best thing you can do is talk to someone,
Right.
whether it's a trusted friend or family member or a therapist. You know, to be alone with those thoughts causes a lot of the issues that people end up with.
Right.
So, you know, I should probably go back into therapy, even just for a tune-up. The same reason why you bring your car in for a tune-up.
Well, you said
every-
you've only gone twice in your whole life.
I
or-
there have been two. I think both times were about maybe 6 months worth.
Right.
But I should go again because there are always thoughts in my head that I don't often know what to do with.
Right.
And it's why I try to keep busy.
Right.
The busier you are, the less time there is to dwell on whatever is bothering you.
Absolutely.
But it's a catch-22 because if you don't deal with whatever is bothering you, it's going to get worse.
Right.
So you're kind of stuck in this vicious cycle of work, thought, work, thought, work, thought. Eventually, you're going to have to do something about that thought. Work is going to be there the next day. That thought is just going to grow.
Right.
And it'll grow to a point where you can't deal with it on your own. You have to do something about it. And it's why people self-medicate, because they have lived so long with whatever is in their head. I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't know. I can't diagnose
I'm
anyone.
glad you put that out there. You're not a doctor.
Yeah, I just wear. The sweater
You
is
just
really.
dress like one.
I do. That's right.
Right.
Dress like a med student. You dress like a great person.
Thank you.
A
There we go.
well-dressed,
There we
dapper,
go. I knew that was coming.
Haberdashery.
Yeah.
That's a word.
So one of the reasons too for this.
I
as
forgot
well-
what I was trying to say. I forgot what point
Yeah,
I was trying to make.
Yeah, we both do that. We go off on tangents and we kind of get lost, and we generally come back.
Because
around.
usually we've got Gomez to reel us in.
We do. And
We're left
Lisa,
to our own devices, and
Yeah.
it's not good.
It's just a shit show.
It is a shit show.
So the other reasons, the shootings that have been going on. Every time, and this is a serious, very serious matter. Every time they go on, there's this huge arguments in the world. And,
Yeah.
Oh well, he was mentally ill. Well, this and that. Well, guns. Well, whatever. So I'm here to address the mental illness side of that. At least my opinion on
Sure.
this. It's not always the answer that this person was mentally ill that did this. A lot of the times it's some punk ass kid who can't deal with being bullied or whatever, and he needs to take it out in a certain way. Now, because the numbers of mentally ill people that are out there are staggering, and if that was the case, this would be happening every day, all the time, if it was just because of a mental illness that this was going on.
Let's use the NFL as an analogy. So
Okay.
there was a really great documentary about Aaron Hernandez on
I watched
Netflix.
it. Yep.
For those who don't know, Aaron Hernandez was I forget what team he was on because I don't care about football. Patriots, but he was a
I don't care
highly
about football either.
highly talented professional athlete who also killed 3 people
Right.
and shot 5 people
Mhm.
and was convicted and hanged himself, and then doctors looked at his brain and there was
said he was
significant
like 85 years old in his brain. Yeah.
But there's a point in that documentary toward the end of it where one of his, I think it was a former teammate, said there are a lot of ex-NFL players who've sustained a lot of concussions who haven't murdered people.
right.
No one wakes up one morning who is of sound mind and body and says, today is the day I'm going to shoot a bunch of people.
Mm-hmm.
Mental illness is part of it, but it's to some who clearly have an agenda, it's used as the excuse.
Right.
Well, we also have a gun fetish culture in this country
Right.
where we have now, guns are almost a religion to some people.
Right.
And
That's true. I
It's-
got guys on my Facebook that they'll do live videos of them with 15,
Yeah.
30 guns, and it's just like, what are you doing?
I-
why
I-
are
you
you
know,
even putting this out there? What's
I-
the point?
I,
I'm
I'm not against guns.
Right.
I'm not
a gun owner myself.
Right,
I got a pistol permit.
Yeah, there's a difference between someone who's trained to use it and someone who's trying to make up for something in their life, some loneliness or whatever.
Well, that can go into a lot of different aspects of life.
Oh, absolutely. Someone who drives the
weightlifting
most
and going to
expensive
a
car
lot
in the
of
world.
that stuff.
Yeah. There's always compensating for. I'm sure I do it. I'm sure there's a part of me that is compensating for whatever I'm lacking in my world.
Right.
But
I think we all have
yeah,
a part of that.
to put the blame all on one thing is wrong.
Yeah, and that's
It's-
what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's always a combination. It's a combination of, there were things about, again, going back to Aaron Hernandez, I didn't know that he was struggling with sexuality. I had no idea, and I don't really care about anyone's sexuality. It's none of my business. Shouldn't be anyone's business.
Right.
You
It's
know,
not.
He was raised in a very masculine culture, so that I can't imagine what it must be like when you feel one way, you're told to be another way, and you have to lie to yourself every day.
Right.
The toll that takes on even the strongest person is incalculable.
Right.
So there are nothing is ever as clear as black and white. There are always secondary, tertiary, a lot of different
I
factors
call
at
it a
play.
gray area.
Yes, And most of life is a gray area.
Absolutely.
If it were as simple as everything is either this way or that way, well, there wouldn't be very many problems in the world because you could categorize it as option A, option B. You're either an option A person or you're an option B person. You might have an option B mood, but you'll overcome that because there's option A over here.
Right.
The reality is we live in that area of gray, which is as obvious as certain things may be on the surface. The more you peel back the layers, the more you realize how complicated it is, how nuanced it is,
Right.
how just how many layers there are.
Right.
You get to know anybody and you learn their backstory, you begin to get a picture of why that person is the way they are. I didn't know about your dad and your grandfather, and you didn't know about my grandmother.
No.
It's to an extent, it's the cross we bear. It's part of who we are.
It also makes you who you are as a person.
For better or worse.
Absolutely.
If I had never gone through that,
Oh
if
my
I had
God,
never,
I wouldn't give anything I've been through in my life. People will be like, would you rather be this person? The answer is no. The only person I would ever want to be is me.
yeah, because I don't know how to be anyone else.
Right. It's not that I don't know. I would never want to be
Right.
either.
But,
I don't care what they got.
But there are times where I'll think if I had never gone through fill in the blank, whatever the experience was, heartbreak, loss, great, profound joy, would I be where I am now? And the answer is no one knows because there's no map.
Or if you did something different, who
Right.
knows? Would you even be alive right now?
If my parents never met in Houston, if they had never gone to that party in 1980, whatever it was, 83, no, I was not conceived in that moment. It was
Hanging out in the bathroom.
It was the week later. It was the following week. So I'm told. It was an accident.
You were told that? Well, that's where all your problems go from.
Directly, a good many of them. But
My dad didn't have me until he was in his 50s, so I'm pretty sure I was an accident too, buddy.
that's fine. We'll stick together.
Right.
Brothers in accidents.
Right.
If you change just one variable, and your entire life has changed. It's the butterfly effect. If let's say you're able to go back into the past and you change one little thing, the entire fabric of our current reality, in theory, could change.
Yeah.
In reality, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, it's a theory. Obviously, time travel doesn't exist, and it's just a theory. But, what if you had, let's say your grandfather had not developed schizophrenia. He still would have produced your dad, but what would have changed? And
See,
the thing is, you can't answer that because there is no
you
answer.
can't, but my father did emphasize on education a lot because of his upbringing.
Right.
Now, let's say that didn't happen. Would he have emphasized as much on education? Who knows? You know what I mean?
There are.
Who knows? He may have been a totally different person. So
one thing my cousins and I talk about a lot is how would our lives be different if our grandparents were still around? Think about everything that happens in the span of 25 years.
Right.
Marriages, children, careers,
Births,
loss,
deaths,
everything.
Right.
A lifetime. That's a generation. That's a little over a generation.
Right.
So everything that we have celebrated, everything we have mourned, everything in the news that's happened in 25 years, how would it be different if they were around? Would the dynamic of the family be different? Yes, it would.
Yeah. There were a lot of things, speaking of grandparents, there's a lot of things that we did because they were around.
Yes. I'm not a religious person. I think when you die, that's it. You decompose, and that's the end of it.
Yeah.
And the best thing that you could hope for is that you are remembered fondly and that people talk about you, and when they think about you, they smile.
Right.
Or they're reminded of some, dumb
that,
joke
that,
or whatever.
That, for me, and this is, I mean, we're going to differ on this, and it's because in my world I kind of have to. For me, it would be a sad thing if my girl never got to see her son again. And so for me, in my world, I believe in heaven for that reason
Yeah.
alone.
I would
and
love.
is that going to be the answer? Who knows? I guess we'll find
No,
out when we get
and
there.
no one comes
You know
back.
what I mean? Right.
You know, that would be the
right,
greatest story of all,
Right.
is if someone comes back and says, here's what you can expect.
Right.
There are no harps.
Right.
There's this endless buffet line, and you can
And Biggie
sleep
and Tupac are
as long-
smoking
yeah.
blunts. Yeah.
Oh, no, they're alive. Everyone knows that. They're partying with Kurt Cobain. Everyone knows that, Wyatt.
Is this another Joe fact?
Could be.
It is.
That could be a real fact. I don't know. I'm not an expert.
Right.
Certainly not a genius. I think it's obvious. But if it maybe there is a heaven or hell. My personal belief is
I'm not sure. Honestly, I'm not sure if there is a hell. I think that there's trials that you go through in life to prove, who you are as a person. I think that could be part of.
Have you
hell.
heard the theory that hell is life?
That's exactly what I just said. Yeah.
Well, I rephrased it in a more intelligent way.
Oh.
There's I forget his name, but there was a preacher who used to preach. I think it's called the Gospel of Prosperity, where if you pray a certain amount of times, you'll be blessed with all the
Yeah, it's
riches
ridiculous.
of man. Well, this guy had one of those mega churches in maybe Atlanta, somewhere down south, maybe Florida.
Yeah.
And he's sitting at home. There was a documentary on him about 10 years ago. He's at home and he's watching the evening news, and there's a story about starving kids in Africa. And this preacher says out loud to God, "How could you let that happen?" And he says, God answered, "Is that what you think?" And in that moment, his entire philosophy changed, where instead of preaching that you can get rich if you send the preacher $10, he changed his entire philosophy, and he started preaching that hell, as we know it, is entirely man-made. That you can't tell me that the guy who lost his wife and kids in a fire isn't going through hell. Doesn't make
He
him
absolutely is.
doesn't mean he's a bad person, and it doesn't mean that he made some mistake somewhere in the timeline and that's his punishment.
Right.
It just means it was an unfortunate thing to happen, and now his life, as he knows it, is over, and now he has to rebuild. Or the congressman who gets caught with his pants down with the intern. You can't tell me that guy's not going through hell, but it's a hell of his own making.
Absolutely.
And that's what this guy preached, and he actually was ostracized by his colleagues. And he lost his church, he lost his $1 million house. He had to rebuild. But in doing so, he was able to find that message of whatever you think of life on earth and whatever you think about life after death, hell is something that you create. And hell is something that you can come back from. And if you want to use that as a metaphor for mental health and that darkness that can be consuming, that can completely, wholly take over a person's life, that's hell.
Right.
I've been there, you've been there. The thing that you lose sight of in the moment is there is going to be light. You are going to
Well, if you can
wake
create
up
your
one
own
day.
hell,
Yeah.
then you can also create your own heaven.
Yes, you can.
So
And knowing that whatever you're going through is eventually going to be okay, it makes dealing with the next time the darkness comes back a little easier to deal with. Because again, it'll pass. Think of the worst storm in history. It ended.
Yep.
Think about
we're going into, the term "this too shall pass."
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And I have to remind myself of that every day. That
I think anyone going
Whatever.
through anxiety,
Yeah.
depression, they should
and I will tell
try to
myself,
remind themselves of that.
I will tell myself all the time, it'll be okay.
Right.
I have to also tell myself that it's okay to feel sad.
Right.
It's okay to cry. It's okay to let yourself feel vulnerable,
Right.
because it's that vulnerability that will make you stronger.
Right.
It's being able to accept that sometimes life does suck,
Right.
and also sometimes life is amazing,
Yeah.
and it's full of wonder and things that you can't even imagine yet.
Right.
But it's also full of bad storms.
Right.
And the question is, can you weather them?
Right.
If you are prepared, the answer is always yes.
Yep. I mean, kind of back to my grandfather in the beginning too. That's, you can look at the stories in different ways, but the beauty that came out of who he was and who, him just being here, the things that have happened, it's a beautiful story.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's what you decide to do with this gift of life that you're given, because it is a gift, and you need to be able to deal with your ups and downs,
Yeah.
Correctly. And I think, on that note, I'm hungry. I think we should eat.
Oh, yeah, we're gonna have soup.
We are. We're
great.
gonna go get some pho.
Can't wait.
And you never had it.
No, I don't think I ever will again.
Well, you will, and then you're gonna love it after
I am
this.
skeptical of something that sounds like is not real.
Yeah,
I am nervous. I am flummoxed.
So this has been the Mental Health Podcast with Cuse Hulk, my guest Joe Salzone, and I appreciate Billionaire Studios for letting us do this here. And until next time, thanks for watching. Peace.